Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nasrine and this is Ethnic Pluralism and Constitutional Design Frameworks for Inclusive Governance. I want to tell you a story. When I was a young girl in Afghanistan going to school, we had a rule in our house, and that was that my mother insisted that my brother and I, whenever we got a form from school, we fill it out ourselves in pencil and show it to her. And every time I put in where it said ethnicity, Tajik, she would pick up and say, no, 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 you're going to put us in prison. And she will erase it and leave it blank and put where it was about citizenship, Afghan. This is my earliest encounter with ethnicity. Years later, when I was preparing this book, قصاریخ ملالای مقالت ارده ببخشید قدم‌های آشتی و مسئولیت ما افغان‌ها من کتاب غلط پیشریم هستم. It's a book where every ethnicity or social group of Afghanistan had to describe their steps of peace. I realized that in those days the structure of social groups in Afghanistan was like a step ladder. Some groups were at the top and some groups were going down, down, down until there were some that were totally in the lowest ranks. I also realized during the development of that book that we as Afghans, we do not know our own social group very well. And worst of all, we don't know the other social groups either. So there is a problem if you want to live together and you don't know each other. Okay. Social groups, and in particular ethnic groups, have become more visible and vocal in these years of war. 50 years of 3 wars, the Soviet occupation, the Taliban first time, and now the second time. In these years of war, social groups have actually become very vocal and very visible. And they have actually become a great strength of Afghanistan, to my way of thinking. But unfortunately, this diversity has also become a major contributor of conflict and discord inside Afghanistan, among ourselves, as well as a colonial tool in the hands of outsiders. During the same time, study of diversity and pluralism has flourished. I'm very happy about that. I thank Zalmay Nishat and Mosaic to give me an opportunity to be part of this timely issue with such great academic and up-close experience as my panelists here. Our panel is composed of 3 people, Dr. Yahia Baiza, Dr. Javeed Ahwar, and Mr. Rahmatullah Yarmal. I look forward to listening to them, and each one will have about 16 minutes to talk, and I will have a short introduction of each before they begin talking, but for a bigger bio of each one, Please refer to your own documentation of the conference. And at the end, we will have a question and answer part, and I'll discuss how we will proceed with that when we get there. Now we begin with Dr. Baiza. Dr. Yahia Baiza, a PhD in education, is a senior researcher at the Aga Khan Center, the Institute of Ismaili Studies. He's the author of Education in Afghanistan, Developments, Influences, and Legacies since 1901, and also Education in Troubled Times. The title of his talk is Pluralism as an Imperative, Not an Option in Afghanistan. I love that. Dr. Baiza, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I stand there.
For decades, the political landscape of Afghanistan has been a tragic testament to the destructive power of division. The country's history is not merely one of conflict, but also a calculated, persistent strategy of political divide, where ethnic and religious identities have been engineered as instrument of power. In this talk, my argument is that the politicization of these differences has been the primary engine driving Afghanistan through a cycle of unspeakable human atrocities, from genocide and perpetual warfare to the rise of global religious movement. Furthermore, it has served to systematically criminalize and marginalize groups lacking political power. In examining Afghanistan's past, we perhaps need to ask a critical question. Is a naturally diverse society in itself sufficient for peace? In my view, to which I'm explaining in today's talk, the only viable escape out of this cycle is the conscious, deliberate adoption of pluralism, not as a vague ideal, but as a fundamental political and social framework, essential for survival and prosperity. It is crucial to distinguish between passive diversity and active project of pluralism. Afghanistan, like most societies, does not lack diversity. It is a mosaic of ethnicities, languages, different religious interpretations that existed for centuries. However, coexistence is not peace. Diversity alone is a demographic fact, a condition where groups live side by side, often in silent tension or mutual suspicion. Pluralism, in contrast, is an achievement. It is a constructed environment that must be consciously and deliberately built. It requires the creation of an enabling space where multiple belief and value systems are not merely recognized, but are given a legitimate voice, engaging in continuous dialogue within a shared community. To mistake Afghanistan's inherent diversity as a foundation of peace is to ignore the deliberate political forces that have repeatedly shattered it. The tragedy of Afghanistan division is compounded by the fact that the capacity for pluralism is not an alien to the human development and to the human condition. One can observe its roots in the earliest stages of human development. Children interact through play without the imposed construct of ethnicity, race, or class. Their associations are formed on the basis of simple shared humanity. This innate potential and this innate ability is systematically socialized out of them as they are absorbed into the other world, a world pre-furnished with rigid traditions, historical grievances, and politicized ethnicities. Afghan society, in this sense, is a stark case study from the ethnic-centric rule of various dynasties to the intolerant theocracy and the relational political parties that generations of generations force Afghan people and push them into a condition that they do not see themselves as citizens of a common nation. Instead, they see themselves as members of tribe or sect in a zero-sum struggle for survival and dominance. The resulting landscape is one of identity, is one where identity is a weapon and difference is a threat. Therefore, the call for pluralism in Afghanistan is not a gentle appeal for multicultural appreciation. It is a critical political necessity. To break the cycle of violence, the people and most importantly, the political architects of any future Afghanistan must perform a gentle appeal for multicultural appreciation. It is a critical political necessity. To break the cycle of violence, the people and most importantly, the political architects of any future Afghanistan must perform a radical act of imagination. They must actively rise above their entrenched traditions that have justified centuries of bloodshed. This requires observing and legitimizing the plural realities of other groups, not as a threat to be managed, but as integral parts of the national fabric. This is a monumental task, I know that demands institutional safeguards, a civic education that celebrates rather fears differences, a political system that distributes power inclusively. Now, coming to my personal philosophical approach to this debate, pluralism has to be consciously and intentionally constructed. My conviction in achieving it comes from my philosophy of education. For those of you who don't know me, I specialize in the field of education, especially Afghanistan and in the wider Muslim world. My philosophy of education focuses on fostering critical pedagogy and in-depth thinking as an intellectual tool to transform education from a mechanism of domination into a practice of intellectual freedom. I believe in empowering students to critically navigate, question, and reshape the borders that seek to confine not only their minds, but also their futures. If school is a manifestation of society, what goes inside schools both reflects the existing structures, values, and problems of society, and in turn actively shapes and reproduces them. As such, schools act as mirror, displaying the realities of their surrounding communities, while also contributing to social reproduction, whatever that involves transmitting dominant values, creating social hierarchies, or promoting social mobility and citizenship, depending on a society's structures and goals. In Afghanistan, we have two major education systems, the so-called modern education and madrasa education. These two parallel systems not only reflect the structures and values of two parallel societies, but they also nourish and reproduce them. In my view, Much of Afghanistan's problem of division and desire for ethnic, religious, and gender supremacy and suppression is rooted in both the societal structures and education systems. Before moving forward, to introduce you to the ground on which my philosophy of education is anchored, Paulo Freire's and Henry Giraud's pedagogy provides a powerful framework for understanding how education can be systematically weaponized to enforce ideological control rather than foster genuine empowerment. This framework and its theoretical underpinnings highlight that education can either be a tool for liberation or a mechanism of domination, depending on who controls it and for what purpose. In his Pedagogy of the Oppressed, published in 1970, Freire critiques the banking model of education, where knowledge is deposited into passive student rather than developed through critical dialogue. Society and school, as has already been stated, reinforces one another. Educationally speaking, the country's education system, whether modern or religious, often follow banking model, treating students as passive vessels to be filled with state-approved or religiously dominant ideology. Let me give you an example from the past 5 decades in Afghanistan, where both education system, religious and modern, were heavily politicized for social control. To be more precise, starting with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, madrasa education, madrasas become a pipeline for the training and supply of jihadist fighters, transforming a national struggle into a global struggle and into a global jihad movement. This radical ideology has, since the political shift in August 2021, become a model of governance for radical religious groups. If under the Soviet occupation, Marxist-Leninist ideals were the state ideology, or during the time of the Republic, the so-called liberal democracy was the state ideology, today the current de facto policies has pushed Afghanistan into a direct religious ethnic clash, and this is a very dangerous consequence. Yet modern technology, as we all know, social media and others, spread what is local into a global level, and what is a local threat becomes a global threat. To curb ethnic divide and religious extremism, instead of fueling it, a fundamental pedagogical shift is essential. A shift not just at the educational level, but also at societal level. I encourage and challenge my students to move from the banking model of education to problem-solving education, which empowers students to become active agents and critical thinkers instead of passive containers of receiving what is prepared for them. In a country like Afghanistan, education and schools are ultimate battlefield between a fragile past and a stable pluralist future. Building upon Freire's critical pedagogy, as Giraud argues, schools are battlefield of democracy when dominant ideologies are both enforced and resisted. Today in Afghanistan, we see the same thing. A dominant ideology is enforced, but also is resisted. For too long, Afghanistan has been a site of ideological warfare fought across borders, not just geographical, but more importantly, cultural, political, and social. There are the lines drawn by dominant power structures to separate people and cultures by creating us versus them. For example, what is Islamic, what is non-Islamic, Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, etc. But also male and female. And the segregation of male and female has gone beyond a simple segregation of public life, but it has moved into intellectual life as well. Girls are not allowed to go beyond primary level. Just give me 1 minute. Thank you. I ensure that students understand the depth of critical thinking and apply it as a tool for attaining intellectual freedom. To do so also means to get them engaged in an active process, what at least has 3 main goals. The first one, to cross borders, to intellectually and empathetically step outside one's own immediate experiences and to see other realities. Secondly, to critique borders, meaning to analyze and question why these borders exist, who created them, who benefited them, and who is marginalized through these borders. And thirdly, to learn how to redraw and how to reshape borders, meaning how to create a more inclusive and more democratic spaces for learning and dialogue. It is about creating a borderland where diverse voices can interact on a more equal footing. Just the last paragraph. In conclusion, the suffering of Afghanistan is a man-made catastrophe engineered through the instrumentalization of difference in society and education. The solution, consequently, must be equally deliberate and constructed. To continue on the part of divisive politics is to choose a known future of perpetual conflict. Embracing critical thinking and pluralism is the only untrodden path towards a different destiny. It is the conscious, arduous, and essential project of building a society and a nation where the very differences once exploited for destruction become the sources of its strength, resilience, and ultimate peace. For Afghanistan, pluralism is not a choice, it is the only option. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Baiza. I agree, pluralism done the right way is our panacea in Afghanistan. Yes. Our next speaker is Dr. Javeed Ahwar, a native of Afghanistan, now a visiting scholar at the Turkic Studies Department of Nazarbayev University. He is currently working on 2 books. One, Amir of Bukhara, Memoirs of Alim Khan, with essays by Sadruddin Aini and Abdurrauf Fitrat. The second one is Kabul, Bukhara, and Beyond, a history of intellectual and political transformation. The title of his talk is Demystifying Ethnic Politics in a Discourse of Ethnic Justice. Dr. Ahwar, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mr. Nishat, for organizing the conference, and Ms. Gross for introducing me. So the topic that I'm going to, I'm a historian, and today I try to be less of a historian. I have backgrounds in cultural anthropology and political science and law. This is the article or the presentation that I'm going to present today is based on my ethnographic fieldwork in Hamburg in 2017 among the Afghanistani or Afghan diaspora in Hamburg, and then of course a couple of follow-up visits, and I stayed another 9 months among the diaspora there in 2021. So I would briefly go through my fieldwork and what did I do there at that time, and then talk about the analytical tools, how to study ethnicity and ethnicity in the discourse of justice. And at the end, I would try to put final words like why I think that ethnicity as a category is problematic to consider as analytical or as a political community in the future. Okay, so I arrived in Hamburg in 2017, and I tried to study the community, but I didn't know how to begin with the fieldwork. So and I interviewed a couple of people, and they told me that a big number of them are living in different districts of Hamburg, like in Billstedt, in Janfield, in Mummelsbamberg, and Rahlestedt, and Steindamm. Of course, this is a zone where most of the markets belonging to our countrymen are there. So I carried more than 70 interviews with members of different waves of migration. And one of the traits of the communities that the majority of them are Persian-speaking people from Herat, and it's also sometimes referred to as Little Herat among the diaspora. So the diaspora is composed of different waves, and it began with the 1960s when students from Najat school were coming to Hamburg to get education. And of course, the second wave began with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and then a lot of businessmen and clergies and people who were a bit more religious arrived Hamburg back then. And knowing that Hamburg has always been a hub of trade and business, and they knew that this is the only city that they could go, either Hamburg or Munich. Of course, after the collapse of the communist government, a lot of leftists arrived at Hamburg and Karlsruhe. One of the interlocutors told me that the people that we escaped from, they arrived in Hamburg and we were feeling insecure. They were not welcomed by the previous two groups. Of course, then the former Mujahideen members arrived after the topple of the Mujahideen regime in 1996, and after 2001. A number of people, some of them were also pro-Taliban, they arrived because claiming that they are being threatened by the government. And a major chunk of people arrived after 2021, which ironically composes the majority today. So the composition of the community has changed drastically after the 2021 crisis. My idea was that I'm going to focus only on cultural associations and mosques because they are the places where I can find a big number of people that I could interview them and I could observe them and participate in their activities. So these associations can be clustered and classified into several segments in the literary societies, like they would do poetry reading classes or clubs. Education-oriented, that they would invest in education in Afghanistan, like fund or finance an orphanage or a school in Afghanistan, and then regional clubs, like you have organizations like Heratis and Panshiris and Balkhis and Kabulis and stuff like that, or ethnocentric associations named after a particular ethnic group or somehow composed by a particular ethnic group. So. One thing which I tried to do was that I tried to use certain tools to study the ethnicity, because it's not really easy to come up with a kind of framework to approach and study and analyze the data which I received. So ethnicity can be seen as something, a community of people which has existed historically as a stable community across times and places. But that's the essentialist perspective, which is no more considered as a viable or as an accurate depiction of ethnicity. And then we have constructivism, which allows us to look at ethnicity as something constructive, like looking into discursive category, practices like us and them, and how us becomes something and them becomes something different. Or as Dr. Baiza was talking about, instrumentalism, like how do you use your identity to insert control over people or claim certain things when it comes to access to resources or access to opportunities. And then there's also another theory, which is long-distance nationalism, which is fitting in this case because usually what they do is that they are away from the state, but they're still making claims or trying to influence the local politics in the country. And that is, of course, exemplified by the presence of a lot of dual citizen ministers in the cabinets in the last 20 years, which shows like the diaspora has been actively engaged in the local politics of Afghanistan. So the fourth category, which I really like, and I try to look at ethnicity from that perspective, rather than looking at ethnicity as a fixed community of people, Brubaker looks at ethnicity as a way of perceiving a community, as a way of thinking, as a way of as a worldview, as a way of perceiving the reality. Sometimes it entails forgetting certain things and remembering certain things and misreferring to certain things and promoting certain ideas. The Speakers Association, and they avoid the name Tajik because they don't feel at ease with the name, or at times representing themselves as regional associations like Iraqis and Panjshiris and Badakhshanis and Balkhis. But that also reflects the idea, the situation of the community, that they are not united on internally, and this also represents the fraction within the community. So ethnicity and justice, which is also the tagline of the panel. So all these groups, I mean, just talking about those ones which have ethnocentric focus, they are using historical grievances as an argument. Like we have been suppressed, and that we deserve to get certain. They are using arguments of distributive justice or reparative justice, that since we have been suppressed and victimized, we need to make sure that in the future a system is established in the country that they would protect certain groups against possible discriminations or possible violation of their rights. So, and one of the things which some of these organizations are putting forward is ideas about Hazaristan or Guni Turkestan, but no Tajikistan, since there is a country already named after ethnic Tajiks. But then of course that doesn't mean that Tajiks do not have ethnic politics or they do not endorse ethnic politics. It's just that they are somehow trying to disguise behind certain names which are looking more neutral than others. But there's also, if you study these associations called Khorasan or like for example, they also do not have a clear ethnic mandate. So basically they are promoting ideas about language or history, but not a clear-cut Tajik-centric agenda. So highlights, to save, to spare more time for the panel. So these organizations are fighting within each other to claim rightful representation of their ethnic groups. The rivalries between them. So there was one instance which I recorded in my fieldwork, was the Munich Hazaras were somehow criticizing the Hamburg Hazaras for being more flexible and less Hazara by inviting people from other ethnic groups and letting them speak and take a lot of time in their cultural events. Which, of course, it shows the disagreements within the fractions within these organizations. Or at times, you get to see stances where, for example, I saw Hazara associations were invited to the Massoud commemoration event, and they put forward the condition that we only attend the ceremony if you put the billboard of Abdullah Ali Mazari next to Massoud, or else we will not attend. So you get to see how these associations representing themselves as as representatives of these ethnic communities. And what they do is they also strictly policing activities of their members. Like they need to behave in ethnic way rather than letting them have their own opinion on certain different issues. And of course, you get to hear, when you listen to them, you get to hear people like how they said Afghan. I had one instance when one of the interviewers asked me, please don't use the word Afghanistani because the separatist uses that word. But it's difficult to navigate between these associations. One of them prefers one word, the other one prefers another word. But definitely there is a big discussion on the idea of we are not Afghans, and you got to see this particular incident in Australia that the Hazara community argued that we need to rename the Afghan Bazaar change it into Little Bamyan because Afghans are our suppressors, not ourselves. So that in the mobilization is there. These associations are successful in organizing demonstrations and pushing certain narratives forward. And of course, they claim to be taken, they try to be taken seriously as representatives of these different ethnic groups rather than as cultural associations. one thing which I'd like to put my final words in this way, that when you look at the region, whether it's Iran or Pakistan or Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, no country is composed of one ethnic group. That's the reality. You have all the different ethnic groups living in different countries, but in the case of Afghanistan, what happened is that if you look at, let me just kick in the historian self here now. If you evaluate the manuscripts which we have from 18th, 19th century, we don't get to find the name Pashtun in this literature. And instead, we find the Ghalzais and Duranis and all these different fractions within the Pashtun community. Of course, the government in Kabul has been very successful in putting this idea forward that there is a homogeneous Pashtun society speaking Pashto, denying the fact that a big chunk of them speak Persian and they're monolingual, and denying the fact that the majority of them identify primarily as a member of a tribe or a clan rather than Pashtun. But this habit has also been copied by non-Pashtuns as well, that they try to project themselves as internally homogeneous, that they deny the existence of diversity within themselves. Like, they do not want to, for example, there was an instance where they said, we should not call ourselves Heratis, we should call ourselves Tajiks, But that's also the impact which the government policies has had on these intellectuals in this case. One of the dangers of this further ethnicization of the diaspora or the community or the literati is that it might incite problems within the group. So if you are analyzing the Hazara Association separately and Tajiks separately and Pashtun separately, you get to see that they are fighting with each other to deny the presence of diversity within themselves. So certain vulnerable groups would get exposed to discrimination or expulsion because they do not endorse certain narratives within the community. And another issue, which is my last word, is that there is no geographical zone in Afghanistan which represents only a single ethnic group. In every single region of the country, you get to find different people living side by side. So the only, if you were talking about ethnicization of federal government in the future, we need to also take into consideration that it might expose people to discrimination in the future, not by the government, but at the federal level or at the provincial level. So in that sense, unless we take district as a unit of analysis, that would be a different case, because you might find districts representing one particular ethnic group, but not at provincial levels. We all have that experience of sharing the neighborhood with a different ethnic group. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Ahwar, thank you so much for that very illuminating but also stimulating talk. And now we have our third speaker, Mr. Rahmatullah Yarmal, a one-time colleague of mine, and he's an Afghan politician. He served as governor of Zabul from 2018 to 2019, and governor of Laghman from 2020 to 2021. A Pashtun from Kandahar, he managed governance in conflict-affected provinces and survived multiple assassination attempts. One of them includes a deadly 2020 bombing in Laghman. Yarmal played a pivotal role in Afghanistan's provincial administration during very turbulent times towards the end of the republic. Mr. Yarmal is going to be talking in Pashto, and his translator, I don't see him. Okay, Zalmay Nishat is sitting there, and the floor is yours.
بسیار زیاد تشکر خانم گروس، ډیره مننه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. پوهېږم ټول به خسته سوي، یو اوږده ورځ مو درلودله. ټولو ته بیا هم ښه راغلاست وایم. ځای لري چې د ښاغلي نشاط او همکارانو څخه او د موزایک فاونډیشن د ټولو همکارانو څخه مننه وکړو، او هغو کسانو څخه هم چې دا زمینه یې مساعده کړې ده. موږ ټول دلته راټول سوي او په دې مورد بحث کوو. کور مودان یو ښه هڅه ده. او د شروع د خبرو څخه مخکې حق لري زموږ هغه سپېڅلي شهیدان، زموږ امنیتي او دفاعي ځواکونه چې په تېرو 20 کلو کې د خپل شیرین ځان په بدل کې د افغانستان د عزت لپاره ودرېدله، ځانونه یې قربان کړل. د هغوی یاد وکړو، د هغوی ارواح دې ښاد دي. همدارنګه زموږ د هغه سپېڅلو مبارزینو چې په دې څلور کاله د استبداد او اشغال کې د دې په وړاندې درېدلي دي، هغه که د مقاومت د ملي جبهې اتلان دي او که هم د ازادۍ د جبهې اتلان دي، په شهادت که رسېدلي دي، د هغوی ارواح دې ښاد دي. که زخمیان دي خدای دې اجل او روغتیا ور نصیب کړي، د هغوی کورنیو ته تسلیت وایي. او هغه ځوانان چې په ډېر بې ګناه حالت کې محبسونه په ډک دي، بندیان دي په یوه نامه او بل نامه، که په کابل کې دي، که په پنجشیر کې، که په بدخشان، که په کندهار کې دي، او لا هم ولسونه درېږي یا ولاړ دي، هغوی ټولو فامیلو دې ته تسلیت وایو. زه 3-4 مسلو باندې غواړم لنډ بحث وکړم. فکر کوم ترجمې ته به اړتیا یې که به نه؟
First of all, I would try to be as brief as I can, because I know I'm holding you and between you and lunch and you might be tired, but it is important before I start to basically say a few words about the heroes of the National Army and Police of Afghanistan who fought bravely in the past 20 years and lost their lives because of a dignified life. Also, during the past 4 years of the Taliban occupation, there are groups which have resisted. I would like to name National Resistance Front of Afghanistan if they're fallen ones, and also the Freedom Front of Afghanistan's fallen ones. Need to pay them tribute. But those who are also injured, as well as the prisoners who are kept in prisons in Kabul, in Panjshir or other provinces, I want to pay a tribute to them.
افغانستان زما د دې چې یو دوه ماموریت مې هم درلودله، د هغه څه څخه ډېر متفاوته دی چې موږ په غرب یا په شرق کې دغه په اړه بحث کوو یا خبرې کوو. افغانستان او افغانان په دې باور لري او دغه قومي جوړښتونه په داخل د افغانستان کې هلته خلک د افغانستان د ښایست په سترګو ورته ګوري. په دې کې که زموږ پښتانه ورونه دي، که تاجکان ورونه دي، که هزاره ورونه، که ازبک، که زموږ اهل هنود، که څوک هر څوک هلته دي. او دا په ډېرو نږدې وخت کې زما په عمر کې دا موږ لیدلی هم ده چې زموږ مشکل تر ډېره پورې قومي په دې نه دي پاتې شوی چې موږ عملا زه خپله د دې صحنو بیخي زیات شاهد یم. ځینې خبرې چې زه کوم هغه شاید یوازې د ډایسپورا دپاره یې نه غواړم هغه د افغانستان د داخل خلکو دپاره وکړم، ځکه هغوی په دې شیانو اصلا باور نه لري او دا ټول مسایل هغوی ته ډېر بې ارزښته دي. یوه مسله چې هلته ډېر یادېدلی زما په خپل ماموریت په جریان کې، زه د 100 داسې پیښو شاهد شوی یم چې د یو تاجک سرباز دپاره چې هغه به په سخته کې و، زموږ یو هزاره سرباز ورور تللی دی، خپل ځان یې قربان کړی دی، خو تاجک یې ژغورلی دی. یو تاجک تللی دی، خپل ځان یې قربان کړی دی، یو پښتون یې ژغورلی دی. یو پښتون تللی دی، یو بل اهل هنود څوک چې و یا هزاره ورور، هر څوک چې و، د هغوی د ژوند د نجات لپاره یې حتی خپل ځان قربان کړی دی. زموږ په امنیتي او دفاعي ځواکو کې، زموږ په داخل د افغانستان په داخل کې د ځوانانو د دې ترمنځ کوم څه چې ما تېر 4 کاله کې د دغه قومي اختلافاتو په اړه اورېدلي دي یا یې اورم، دا ما هلته په تېر 10 کاله کې نه دي اورېدلي. ځکه هلته خلک قومي جوړښتو ته د افغانستان د ښایست په سترګه ګوري او په دې نتیجه رسېدلي دي چې د خدای جل جلاله په دې ټوله پراخه مځکه کې دغه جغرافیه زموږ د افغانانو په نصیب رسېدلې ده او په دې کې یو د بل سره دومره نغښتي یو چې هېڅ یو د بل څخه چاره مو نه ده پیدا کړې. نه مو پرون چاره درلودله چې یو د بل څخه جلا سو، نه نن لرو او نه هم سبا لرو. د تاریخ په جریان کې به څه پورته او کښته راغلي، مګر بالاخره دې نتیجې ته رسېدلي دي دا خلک چې افغانستان په دغو قومو ښایسته دی، د دغو قومو د هر بد حالت په وړاندې چې دوی متحد پاتې شوي دي بریا ته رسېدلي دي. او نن هم په دې باور دي چې یوازینی آفت چې پر افغانستان راغلی دی نه قومي مسایل دي نه بل مسایل دي، طالب دی په یو خاصه ایډیالوژي او په یو خاصه مفکوره راغلی دی او دې کې هم خپل د مفکورو پاسه د خپل ایډیولوژي په اساس باندې هغوی ته نه پښتونولي مهمه ده، نه کنداریتوب ورته مهم دی، نه بل څه ورته مهم دی. 1000 طالب هغه ته تر 50,000 اکاډمیک پښتنو مهم دی، او دا ډېره واضح خبره ده. څومره چې زموږ نور قومونه په عذاب دي، زموږ قومونه یا زموږ ولسونه دغومره په تکلیف شوي دي، او دغومره که په کندهار ته راسو، یوازې د کندهار مثال درکړم، په کندهار کې هر هغه سړی چې په څه پوهېږي د طالبانو بد ایسي، هر هغه سړی چې حتی پاکې جامې اغوندي د طالب ته نظر بد راځي، او دا شرایط همدغه طرف ته روان دي. هغه یوازې خپل ایډیولوژي ته روان دي. متاسفانه په دې تېرو 4 کلو کې زموږ وطنوال چې د باندې راغلي دي، چې ملامت هم شاید نه وي، نفس‌تنګ دي، وضعیت خراب دی، افغانستان سره لاسرسی نشته. بیا مسایل د دې دپاره چې ډېر دخیل نه دي، مسایل ډېر کوچني آبادو ته وړي، چې دا اصلا په افغانستان کې
obviously I cannot capture all the nuances that the governor said, but I tried to summarize everything he said. Basically, he says, based on the couple of measures that I had on the ground in Afghanistan as governor, I have witnessed things that probably will contradict some of the assertions that we might hear from different quarters regarding the issue of ethnicity in Afghanistan. But maybe that is more salient sometimes in the communities of the exiled and diaspora outside. But whatever I've seen is based on my own witness during my mission in Afghanistan. He says that the issue of ethnic diversity in Afghanistan is a reality, and it is an issue basically not a problem between any of the people that he has seen on the ground. For example, if a soldier who in the National Security Force of Afghanistan needed rescuing or needed help, let's say his ethnicity was Hazara, a Tajik would sacrifice his life and go and rescue. And the same thing, if it was a Tajik who needed a rescue, the same thing a Pashtun would do, and vice versa. So the the beauty of Afghanistan actually is in its ethnic diversity and its pluralism, and that is a beauty itself. But to politicize this, and especially, maybe among some of the communities outside the country, they sometimes tend to do that, but also maybe politicians as well. So that's the main message that he wants to give is around that. Thank you.
I think it was something about the Taliban.
Yes. Yes, one more thing that's very important. Thank you. He said in the ideology he mentioned, the Taliban are serving their own ideology, and it has nothing to do with issues of ethnic. For example, in Kandahar, if there is someone who is a bit clean, they will have problem with the Taliban will have problem with him, because they only serve those who are following their ideology. Thank you, Dr.
دغه څه ستونزې هم چې په وروستیو کې راپورته شوي زموږ د ځینو سیاسیونو لخوا څخه پورته شوي وي، او هغه یوازې د خپلو شخصي ګټو دپاره دا شی ولاړ، او متاسفانه چې مشکلات یې بیا تر قومو تر دې خلکو پورې هم قرار پر رسېدو باندې وه، که نه تر دا نږدې 2014 پورې د ډاکټر صاحب عبدالله انتخاباتي غونډه تاسو وګورئ، د کندهار غونډه شاید یو د 3 یا 4 لویترینو غونډو څخه وه. همدارنګه رئیس جمهور اسپاق اشرف غني ته شاید په بامیان کې لویترینه خلک یا په لوی تعداد سره خلک راټول شوي. دا چې وروسته د شپې دوی یو ځای په هر ګټو کې چې سره مشترک و شریکانو په هغوی کې و، ماښام یې دا خبره بیا ولس ته رسوله. یو د دوی د سیاسیونو بل ډېر وخت زموږ دغه ډایسپورا چې راغلې ده، موږ د غرب په کتابو یا د شرق په کتابو کې ورک شو. افغانستان خپل ځان ته خپل ځینې تاریخي اصول درلودلي دي، ځینې تاریخي جوړښتونه یې درلودلي دي. دا که د یو ځایوالي دپاره هم شاید هغه څه چې موږ په کتابو کې د غرب وایو هغومره نتیجه ورنه کړي، لکه د افغانستان کلتور ته ولاړ شو، د افغانستان د افغانانو ارزښتو ته ولاړ شو. یو اتهام پر افغانانو یا پر د طالبانو پر مخالفینو دا دی چې دوی نه یو ځای کېږي سره، یا 4 کاله پورې اوس هم خلک دا وایي چې نه یو ځای کېږي. سوال دا دی چې زه چلنج سره وایم، د دنیا هر هیواد چې دا ادعا کوي چې افغانان په دې موضوع کې اختلافات لري، دغه یو تالار د موږ ته 15 ورځې راکړي، دغه یو تالار او لیست چې دوی راکړي د علي په څه خطریا، که په دې کې جهادي رهبران، که مدني فعالان دي، که خوندې دي، که هر څوک دي، د 15 ورځې لپاره به دلته دا خلک سره کښېني، یوه ورځ شاید جنجال وکړي، 2 ورځې وکړي، خو 5مه ورځ دوی یو نتیجې ته رسېږي. اولنۍ مشترکه نقطه چې دوی رسېدلي دي هغه دا ده چې علي په څه تریا ټول خلک طالب نه غواړي، تر دې نور مشترکه نقطه دوی څه شی باید پیدا کړي؟ دا چې د هر څومره د 100 ګروپ چې دلته رسېدلي دي دا ټوله یا 100 نور به پاتې وي. د ټولو یوه مشترکه نقطه دا ده چې طالب د افغانستان د حکومتولۍ لیاقت نه لري.
2 دقیقې لري.
دوی شاید یو څو دقیقې برابود راکړي په دې قدر. موږ دغه جوړښتو ته پام وکړو، د افغانستان دغه ارزښتو ته پام وکړو، دا خلک راسي او خپلو هغه داخلي عنعنوي مسایلو ته ولاړ شو. موږ فکر کوو چې د دغه بد حالت څخه وتلی شو. او ته دا ترجمه څه یوه وروستۍ خبره وکړه.
I should have asked Dr. Sir Michael Semple to translate this. But he basically, in terms of how politicians sometimes have misused the concept of ethnicity in Afghanistan, he underlined that and he gave an example of Dr. Abdullah maybe had a better rally during his election, perhaps in Kandahar, is an indicator of the refuting of the issue that it's an issue between the people. Also, maybe Dr. Ghani had probably the biggest rally in Bamyan, so it's telling. But the most important message that he wants to convey is that the international communities, sometimes insinuation that we are not unified and we cannot come to a unified point. I would challenge you, if you put everybody from diverse communities of Afghanistan into a room, including women, all clerics, whoever, all the representatives of Afghanistan, if you give them 5 days, maybe in the initial 1 or 2 days they might have some issues, but at the end of those 5 days they will come to an agreement. And the most important agreement would be that the Taliban must go and they are not legitimate for governing Afghanistan. That's the main point that I wanted to convey.
وروستۍ مسله دا ده چې څه کول پکار دي. موږ ډېر بحث پر دې وکړي چې افغانستان پر تیر باندې بحث کوو او د افغانستان پر راتلونکي باندې بحث کوو. یو مسله دغه اوسنی حالت هم مهم دی چې پر دې هم بحث وکړو چې دلته اوس حالت کې څه پکار دي. یو مثال داسې دی چې یو څو غلو لوچګانو خلک راغلي دي یا د چا په لمسون یا د چا په ملاتړ باندې او موږ د فامیل اعضاو یو ورونه و خویندې وو، موږ کور یې نیولی دی. اوس دغه کور د څو غلو په لاس کې یا د څو بدو خلکو په لاس کې او زموږ هلته ماشومان ښځې دا ټول داخل کې پاته دي. موږ راوتلي یو د دې پر ځای چې دا فکر وکړو چې دغه کور څنګه وساتو او بیرته یې څنګه واخلو. موږ دا فکر کوو چې یو ورور وایي چې هغه لوړ اطاق زما دی دا ځل، بل وایي چې هغه کوچنۍ مهمانخانه زما ده، بل وایي چې زه خپل د خونې دیوال دا رقم رنګوم. دا په یو جمهوري او په یو دیموکراتیک نظام کې دا اختلافات که موږ هم لرو دا راځي پرېږدو. دغه وخت چې یو ځل افغانستان ته ولاړو د هغه څخه مخکې موږ هغه انرژي چې لرو چې په اګزایل کې یو ټول کم لرو، راځي دا پر دې مصرف کړو چې دغه کور ته څنګه تلای شو. او دې کې مو مثال ولیدی چې نه ایران زموږ شو، نه زموږ دی، نه پاکستان زموږ شو، نه زموږ دی، نه تاجکستان زموږ دی، نه امریکا زموږ ده، نه یوکې د دنیا هیڅ ملک زموږ نه دی. دغه یو سپیره جغرافیه، دغه یو خټین افغانستان، دغه د خټ کورونه، دغه موږ ته رسېدلي دي په خپل قسمت کې. د دې دپاره څه کولی شو؟ دغه خټین کور ته څنګه تلای شو؟ خپل ماشومان خپلې ښځې څنګه ژغورلی شو؟ د دغه جاهلو خلکو څخه د دغه مستبدو خلکو څخه څنګه ژغورل کېدلی شو؟ تر څو دغه وخت کې ټولې طرحې ښه دي. پروفیسر استاد شریعت صاحب ډېر بحث ډېر ښه وکړي. ټولې طرحې ښه دي. هر څه چې راځي په افغانستان کې که فدرالي وایاست که پارلماني نظام دی که بل څه دی، خو د خلکو د اوساګلویو د ارامیو د سعادت د نیکبختۍ دپاره هیڅ نظام هیڅ سټرکچر هیڅ ساختار بد نه دی. هر ځای نه د دنیا په یو ملک نه په یو ملک یې نتیجه ورکړې ده. موږ هم نتیجه اخیستو. د اوس دپاره راځي ټول انرژي په دې مصرف کړو چې څه کېدلی شي. او هغه عملا یوازې په دې کېږي چې د دغو دوو جبهاتو چې دغه اوس دي د دغو تر شا په کلکه ودرېږو، که دا د مقاومت جبهه ده که د ازادۍ جبهه ده. عملا خلک دغه دي. د افغانستان تاریخ ته وګوره، افغانستان په طرحو په کتابو نه نیول شوی دی نه چا نیولی. موږ د طرحو مشکل نه لرو، موږ طرحې لرو. افغانستان هر فرد یو طرحه لري د افغانستان دپاره، هر فرد یو کتاب لیکلی شي، هر فرد غواړي په ذهن کې یو څه لري. موږ یو څه نور څه ته اړتیا لرو، هغه په متحدانه ډول سره ودرېدلی شو، د طالب په مقابل کې ودرېدلی شو. په دې کې پښتون، تاجک، ازبک هېڅ نه، په هر نامه چې وایاست د خراساني په نامه درېږي، د افغان په نامه درېږي، په پښتنو درېږي، په تاجک درېږي، یو څه چې دا راټول شو یو ځل دا کور ته ولاړ شو. بیا به ورې بحث سره وکړو، یو به وایي چې فدرالي ښه دی، موږ به وایي صحیح دی، یو به خپل دفاع وړاندې کوي، یو به خپل نظر وړاندې کوي، بل به خپل نظر. تاسې باور وکړئ شهید امیر زموږ همسنګر زما ورور شهید سو په ازادي د جبهې. په خدای ما د هلمندي ښځو د کندهار د میرمنو یا د کندهار د مندو ټلیفونونه هغه یو ورځ دوې د حالت معلوم نه و چې په شهادت رسېدلی دي که ژوندی. تاسو باور وکړئ د هغوی څخه ما ټلیفونونه ترلاسه کول، هغه میرمنې په دې وضعیت پوهېږي چې هغوی خیراتونه ایښي وه چې که خدای د ده د ژوند خبر موږ ته راکړي چا ول څو روژې نیسم، چا ول څه کوم، چا ول څه کوم، یو خیرات ایښی و. حال دا چې هغه اصلا نه پوهېږي چې شهید امیر تاجک دی، دا ازبک دی، دا هزاره دی، دا څوک. داسې هر سرباز چې موږ کله په اورو که د هرې جبهې دی په شهادت رسېږي، بدترین خبر دی او د افغانستان ټول ملت په زیږېږي. دا کوچني کوچني مشکلات راځي افغانستان ته پرېږدو، موږ دا ظرفیت لرو، هر شی ورې تجربه کولی سو، هر نظام د افغانستان دپاره چې په خیر هغه ورې زغملی سو، زغمل کېدلی سي. لوی ترینه خبره دا ده چې یو ځل دغه طالب سره خبرې ته یو نتیجې ته چې نه رسېږو، منسجم سو، یو ځل دا ایسته سي، د صحنې څخه ولاړ سي، بیا ورې کښېنستلی سو. شراني صاحب خپله طرحه وایي، هرار صاحب خپله طرحه وایي، بیا که څوک خراسانیان کېدل هم دي خراسانیان، څوک افغانان پاتې کېدل افغانان دي سي، څوک تاجک پاتې کېدل تاجک دي سي، مګر راځي وارې کور ته ولاړ شو. تر څو کور ته ولاړ نه سو موږ عزت نه لرو، نه د پښتانه په نامه لرو، نه د تاجک په نامه لرو، نه د هېڅ یو قوم په نامه عزت نه لرو. راځئ یو وارې کورو ته ولاړ شو، ټول انرژي پر دې مصرف کړو، هلته خدای مهربانه دی یو بهتر افغانستان به ولرلی سو. ډېره مننه.
The governor started with a beautiful analogy of saying that we the different diverse communities of Afghanistan own a home, and that home has been occupied by a thug, by thieves, enabled by some foreign powers. Now we are basically sometimes sitting down and saying that, okay, the brothers and sisters are arguing with each other. Once we retake our house back, our home back, some say that I'm going to take this room, some says I will take that room, and some say I'm going to paint that wall that color. But the important thing is that we should unify, come together to take our home back. Once we have our home back, then we can decide on all those details that we are disagreeing at this point of time. And then using that analogy, he went further, basically to kind of, say that the most important thing for us outside Afghanistan is to come together to, yes, it's important to have concepts, proposals, books and stuff like that. Those will not help us to take that, maybe it can guide us, but the most important thing is to unify, to rally, to take back the home from the enemy that has occupied it. And then once we have the home back, then any ethnic group that you're coming from, then, any kind of, let's say, government system that you want to have, if it's federalism, if it's centralized, if it's decentralized, then those can be debated once we have our home back. Or also in terms of the ethnic communities, if you want to remain Khorasani or Afghan or Tajik, that's something that we can debate once that house is taken back from the occupier. So that's the main message that he ended. Maybe I listen. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. And he thanked you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have.
Oh yes, one more point thank you so much. He said the very most important message was that let's stand behind the two resistance fronts that are resisting against the Taliban, the National Resistance Front and the Freedom Front of Afghanistan. And that is the only way to take back that home that he made the analogy. And then he gave a very good example. That's very important. The Afghanistan Freedom Front lost one of its very, very key commanders. His name is Akmal Amir. And he said that when Akmal Amir's destiny was unknown for a couple of days, then people didn't know whether he's killed or he still has survived. He was hearing calls from Kandahar, from different provinces, from women, from men. They were praying for him that if he is praying that Akmal Amir is alive. So that is the message of unity that we have, and that's the message that resistance is the only way we could take back our home from the enemy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, we have reached the end of our panel. Time-wise, it's 12:45, but perhaps we could take 10 minutes. 3 minutes of those, I have 4 comments, and the other 7 minutes we devote to some questions. Is that okay with the organizers and with you all? Give me a yes or a no, please. Yes. Thank you. Okay. I think we had a fantastic group, huh? Different aspects of ethnicity. It took us inside ourselves, it took us outside ourselves, it reminded us of all the tragedies, but I would like to point to 4 points. One is that ethnicity or social group these days do not make a country. A country is made up of citizens. And that is from the day Afghanistan got its independence, 1919, has not been paid attention to. We keep talking about ethnicity as if that is all that matters. Actually, every single one of us have to be the citizen of Afghanistan. The other point is that in the world, there is no country made up of one ethnicity. As some of us are talking about, we are going to be all Tajiks, we are all going to be all Pashtuns, one country. There is no country like that. All ethnic groups of the world have been in, or now in different countries of the world. They are very good at keeping their own culture, history, traditions, but they are also loyal citizens of that country. And that is very important that we all think that way. Number 3, because of what's happened since 1919, I find it, and I also heard it from Ahmad Massoud last month, our only and biggest gripe is lack of not social justice, but political justice. And we must get that. We keep saying, oh, we are all good, but we are going to be the rulers. It won't work anymore. Others will come and really destroy us. We have to admit that we are all deserving of political justice. And finally, perhaps we can make it easier on ourselves if we say everything that's happened in the last 150 years or 200 or whatever, we forgive, and we remain with just one enemy, today's enemy. We are really dispersing our energies, talking about 200 years ago, talking about 80 years ago, me talking about putting my dad when I was 5 years old in prison for nothing, for no crime. Everybody has 500 other gripes this way. Let's forgive all of that and say we have one enemy, and we will work with it that way. Thank you. This was my 3 minutes, and I'm going to take some questions. Please give your name and identify who you want to get the response from. Make your question 1 minute, and our panelists have 2.5 minutes to respond. Please. Yes. And I want some women also, please. Okay.
I'm Ehsan Ahmadi. I'm a general physician from Ipswich. my question is actually possibly to Rahmatullah Yarmal. Basically, I'm not sure whether you want me to speak that in Farsi or Pashto or English, but I'll say English as the others also can understand that we can translate to you. You referred to the fact that basically what is really the most important thing now to defeat the Taliban and everything else, we can actually, as Afghan and Afghanistanis, we can come together and decide. But I think, our problem hasn't started with Taliban, it's not going to finish with Taliban, because we have seen a situation where one government toppled and we still struggle to get through. I think I kind of agree with Nasrine in what she said about national identity and the fundamental of when countries are actually making a nation, and that we identify our nation as on a wrong basis in 1990s, 1919, when our identity, all the beautiful diversity in popularism and everything that we have had, we kind of ignored that and we unified it under something which is not representing everyone. I think, I want to...
1 minute is up. Please finish.
The view of the panel. Thank you.
Okay, they tell me take several. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, could I mic?
Wait, it's your turn.
Mic?
Mic here.
Thank you. Thank you all for very interesting presentations. My name is Dr. Khushi Khan, and I'm here because I have an interest in Afghanistan. I was a consultant with the Women Affairs Ministry, supervised 4 national projects in Afghanistan in the past. My questions, may I ask 2 questions? 2 questions, is it possible? No. Am I allowed to ask 2 questions? Short questions, very short questions. Yeah. So, Mr. Ahwar, thank you. I'm just wondering if you were able to identify the group within that ethnic diversity of Afghans you have studied. Which group was most inclined towards the long distance nationalism, and what was the reason for that? And second question is for Mr. Yarmal, Governor Sahab, and my Governor Sahab and the moderators, both of them actually highlighted the problem of Afghanistan, and there was you both talk about an enemy. Who exactly is that enemy? Have you identified that? And is that enemy just one, or there is a combination, or one enemy with lots of heads? Because it's important to find out, because this conference should not end up as the roadblock, rather as a roadmap. So I just want to know if it is someone which is enemy, or something is enemy, or combination of both. Thank you.
Okay, just briefly, just a brief comment on the question. Yes, our problem did not start with the Taliban, and would not end with the Taliban. So there is this long historical issue in the country. We have a lot of fractions, and the government has been suppressing diversity for decades. So there is added value to discuss about these issues, to make sure that we are transiting to a new stage where we have solutions for our problems. Regarding your question, I don't think that it's easy to grade them based on who is more inclined towards long-distance nationalism. The diasporic context allows each group to develop their own version of the reality. When I'm talking about Hazaras, then the idea is that, okay, we have been historically suppressed, and there are certain historical incidents which has happened in the past in 1880s or 1890s, and then later on during the Civil War. Of course, they are employing all these historical grievances to promote certain projection of their reality. When we talk about Tajiks, of course, then a lot of Tajik intellectuals in the diasporic context, they are coming up with books and writings to challenge the national identity. The idea, for example, the idea that we're not Afghan is coming pretty much not from the is equally coming from the inside the country. Ghulam Muhammad Mohammadi wrote a book in 2009 on this issue, and it was picked up really well by the diaspora and arguing that we should not really use the name of Afghanistan anymore for the country. And then ideas about Khorasan as something an all-encompassing identity that would include all the Turkic and Pashtuns and other groups. So I think it would be unfair if I would tell you that just one of them is more inclined towards long distance nationalism rather than is less. Okay.
Thank you.
ما فکر کوم که ستاسو سوال اخیستی چې زموږ مشکل شاید د طالبانو پورې محدود نه وي. خو دا هم د یاد ونه باسو چې موږ هېڅ وخت دومره غټ مشکل هم نه و لیدلی لکه دا ځل. تېرو وختو کې هم دا قومي په دې نه و چې که دا لږ وختو ته ولاړ سو مثلا دا احزاب چې و که جمعیت اسلامي و دا هم تقریبا همشموله حزب و که حزب اسلامي و په دې کې هم دغومره بد حالت ته کورني جنګونه وسوله مشکلات راغله، خو د قومو ترمنځ د دومره مشکلات نه و راغلي لکه اوس چې راغلي دي. او موږ تر دغه بده ورځ فکر نه کوم چې ولیدلی سو چې په کندهار کې د 9 کلو ماشومه نور ښوونځي ته نشي تللی، یعنې په نور افغانستان کې دا تر 6مه صنفه پورې مکتبونه ستا په کندهار کې دا تر 3مه صنفه پورې نه وړي. او هیڅ افغانستان ته هیڅ ارزښت پاته نه سو من حیث د افغان په نامه، من حیث د قومو. یعنې بدترینه وضعیت چې اوس فکر کوو په 21مه پیړۍ کې 2025 کال کې چې کوم وضعیت کې د افغانستان په داخل کې خلک قرار لري، تر دې بده ورځ زه فکر نه کوم چې بل وخت راغلی وه په دغه ډول. هر حالت کې یو څرک د رڼا و، د راټولېدو یو ادرس و، یو مشکل دغوندې حالت ته نه و رسېدلی لکه اوس چې رسېږي. او دا که همداسې پسې پاتېږي شاید ډېر بد طرف ته ولاړ شي. ستا د سوال په اړه باندې چې دښمن څوک دی، د اوس دپاره دښمن هیبت الله دی په راز کې. ځکه طالبانو کې هم په دا نوي نسل کې ځینې خلک دغسې لیدل کېږي چې لږ په دې پوهېږي چې د خطرات دوی ته راځي. کومه غصه او قهر او عقده چې اوس د افغانستان په خلکو کې شته، دا شاید نه کنټرولېدونکي واوسېږي. که لږ تغییر راځي یا یو لږ څرک د تغییر لیدل کېږي، شاید افغانستان ډېر بد حالت ته په دې ولاړ شي چې خلک دا ځل ډېر غوسهناکه دي، خلک ډېر متنفره دي، خلک د دومره نفرته طالب ته ډک دي چې طالب به ډېر بد وضعیت وویني. او دا چې دوی د نړیوالو اسلحه لري او په میلیارډو مهماتو ته پاته دي، وسله لري، دوی په اسانه آماده نه دي چې دا هر څه پرېږدي. نو طبعا یو ډېر بد حالت افغانستان شاید لاړ شي که موږ دلته منظم نه سو. بله خبره د مشخص تعریف لپاره هر هغه څوک چې د افغانستان په دغه مفکوره واوسېږي چې یوازې د یوه ډله پر افغانستان حاکمیت وکړي، د افغانستان عزت یې تر پښو لاندې کړي، د څو پردیو بېګانه خلکو په خاطر باندې د افغانستان ارزښتونه تر پښو لاندې کړي، د افغانستان اقوامو ترمنځ بې اتفاقي جوړه کړي، د افغانستان د خلکو ترمنځ، د ولسونو ترمنځ. او هر هغه څوک دښمن دی چې زموږ د خوندو حقوق نه مني. هر هغه څوک چې د مېرمنې ته په یو دغسې سترګې ګوري لکه طالب چې ګوري، هر هغه څوک چې زموږ ماشومه نه پرېږدي چې مکتب ته ولاړه شي، د افغانستان دښمن دی. او پاتې شو د روډماپ د دې په اړه باندې دا خوشې تبلیغات دي چې وسوله 4 کاله په دې مخکې دی وسوله چې طالب تغییر کړی دی او په دې کې ډېر رول نړیوالو درلودي. موږ باندې دا تېر کړي چې طالب تغییر کړی دی، دا نور د 19 د دې طالب نه دی، هر څه یې سم کړي دي. نن بیا یې دا وضع اچولې یا پر دې باندې کار کوي چې تاسو راځئ یو روډماپ ته ولاړ شئ. دا سړک بند دی، دا مکمل سړک شته نه، هېڅ ادرس نشته. یوه دقیقه چې دا مهم هېڅ شی نشته. ونیسي که مذاکرات نتیجه ورکولی شي، دنیاوال دی وکړي. اصلا هغه په مذاکرات په نامه باور نه لري، د مذاکرې په نامه باور نه لري، په نړیوالو باور نه لري، په دنیاوالو باور نه لري. نن انټرنیټ قطع کېږي، هغه په دې خاطر باندې چې اصلا هغوی ته هېڅ شی ارزښت نه لري. یو بند سړک ته یا یو بند دیوال ته چې افغانان درولي دي، وایي نه لاره پیدا کړه، ونیسه مذاکره وکړه، د چا سره یې وکړم، څه رقم یې وکړي. دا تر یو وخته نتیجه ورکوي. دا د 4 کاله نور هم تېر شول، نړیوالو په دې بهانو باندې چې داسې باید مذاکرات ولاړ شي. کال 2 بعد دا خبرې معنا نه لري. ډېره به سخته شي. هم منطقې ته منطقه د اوس ویني دا نتیجې او غرب یې هم شاید ولیدلی شي په ډېر ډول. تشکر.
Ay baklara gupta
To basically try to summarize this whole rich talk, he started with an analysis of, unfortunately, the situation is getting worse, and he predicted that because the Taliban have full control of the country and has a lot of ammunition in their hands, in the future, the people of Afghanistan are very hateful of the Taliban, and the future seems grim. And the possibility, and also the Taliban, with all these ammunition that they have, they will not let very easily the power go. So that is the grim analysis that he had. And in relation to the international communities trying to portray the fact that Taliban at this time has changed, it was basically he blames that on the international community's portraying of the Taliban that they have changed this time, and that proved that it was totally wrong. So that in terms of the enemy asked, I think the enemy was named, and he said Hezbollah is the enemy and the Taliban basically. So there's no confusion on that. And he says whichever group wants to dominate Afghanistan without including the rest, the diversity of Afghanistan, that will fail. Any group that will to exclude women, as well as any group that will not allow girls in Afghanistan and children to read, their future is basically doomed.
They are enemies.
They're the enemy. They are our enemies, basically.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would like to maybe you ask me also. I think the diplomatic way would be for me not to answer. And I am not a diplomat, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a bureaucrat. I've always been an activist. So I'm going to give you my take. Please don't get angry at me. Please do not excommunicate me. I am not against anybody. I don't hate anybody. I lived in Afghanistan from 2001 till 2019. The first few years of it was rather quiet, and we were full of hope and building Afghanistan. After that, a group of people came from another country every 2 weeks and committed either an explosion or a suicide bombing and killed a lot of Afghans. They came in the name of, well, Afghanistan is occupied by a superpower and we are getting rid of them. It was actually everybody that got killed was mostly them. To me, right now, there is an occupation engineering is going on in Afghanistan. This group that came, yes, many of them are Afghans, but they were trained, they were financed, they were given ammunition and arms by another country. They would do their deed, they would go back to that country, rest, get paid, see their families, and 2 weeks later come back with a new assignment. Now, this country, I am not their enemy. I don't want to mention them, you all understand. They are so beautiful, their people, and so large, that if they pay attention to themselves, within 5 to 10 years, they will be one of the superpowers of this world. And I have come to the conclusion that Afghans, the citizens of Afghanistan today, we are too weak to convince this country to give up.
So the problem is outside Afghanistan.
Excuse me, let me finish, please. I've never interrupted anybody. What I think we need the international community is to work with us in getting that country to change its mind. There are now several books that are very well documenting everything. And this is not about attacking another country. This is not about wishing another country ill. This is not even about not recognizing another country. If we do not address this side of it, the issues of ethnicity and other problems, poverty and women that we have discussed internally, I know, I'm 79 years old, I know we can internally resolve it. But if we have this kind of every 20 years, a country coming and taking Afghanistan, whether it's Soviet Union or somebody else, we cannot resolve it ourselves. I have said this 25 years ago, I say it now. For that to finish, we need the international community's help in very, very nice and sweet ways. I'm finished.